Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jennifer Rodriguez, and I am the interim CEO for Quigley House. As most of you know, Quigley House is the Certified Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Center for Clay County. And as a previous director of sexual assault and having come off of April as Sexual Assault Awareness Month and moving into May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month, I have with me today a very special guest that I'm excited to announce. The purpose of our session today is to bring awareness to the issue of sexual violence and how it affects men and male survivors of all ages. So I have with me a friend that I grew up with, someone, like I said, I've known many, many years. He's a fantastic advocate of all kinds. And here he is, Joe Mitch. Say hi, Joe.
How you doing, Jeff?
I'm doing good. I'm really glad that you've agreed to join me today because I feel it's important that we recognize the survivorship of men and what their journey looks like compared to the journey that women look like. And of course, you know, all the bias that our society brings into that. And you know, the struggles are both difficult on both sides, and they share a lot of the same symptomatic behavior and so forth. The trauma is the same, but it interprets itself differently because of our society in general. So I just want to give everybody an opportunity to get to know you a little bit, Joe. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about yourself with us, that would be great.
I don't really even know where to start. Okay, obviously this is about sexual trauma. You know, that's where this started. So I guess that's where my story starts. I was abused as a child. I do not remember when it started. I remember when it ended. It ended when I was 12 years old. I only had one abuser. The abuser was a family member. I never told anybody. I never confided in anybody. It was like my dark little secret, I guess, if you will. And like I told you the other night on the phone, even if I knew how to go about, even if I wanted to tell somebody at that age, I didn't even have the vocabulary to let anybody know what was going on. So it ended when I was 12, and I don't want to say that my childhood was taken away from me, but I didn't have a normal childhood. So as the abuse ended, now here I am, you know, hitting puberty, becoming a teenager, very active in sports. I always felt out of place. I never felt like one of the guys. I always felt like I had to change my personality. There were many years and instances where I actually questioned my sexuality. I didn't know what to think because, you know, as guys are growing up, you know, I'm sure girls do the same thing, but as guys are growing up, guys talk about girls and they, you know, they have that whole thing. And I didn't have those experiences because I was always very uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. So then that's kind of when I kind of created my persona, if you will, the tough guy, the athletic, I wanted people to see me a different way than I felt inside.
Hyper masculine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that literally became like a full-time job for me. And, you know, we can fast track a little bit, but looking back now, that's when I realized that I really lost my identity. I never really developed an identity because everything I did, I was trying to please somebody else or I was trying to fit in. So I guess I just didn't have the normal childhood upbringing. I didn't go through the normal levels of development. Mm-hmm. And, you know, unfortunately, I can look back now and I can see where it really affected me growing up. And I can see where it's still very detrimental and affects me to this day.
Yeah.
So
I think one of the most important things of what you've just said about sexual assault, especially when you are a child, is that it has groomed you to try to please whoever you're with. You have
Yeah.
not been taught that it's okay to be yourself because your thoughts and feelings have never been respected or valued. It's
Yeah.
always about the other person. It's never about you. And when you go through that, and you mentioned, questioning your sexuality, that's so common when somebody's been perpetrated as a child, because again, you don't know if that's you, if what's happened makes you different because of the act itself. And there's this confusion that sexual assault is about sex when it's really about power and control. And so everything you describe is so common. The issue is we don't tell kids that this is what this looks like. We don't have enough dialogue or education for people to know that it's okay to talk about it. And it's okay just to say something's not right. I don't like this.
Well, I think what you just said is so important, because unfortunately it is so common, but because it's swept under the rug and it's kept a secret, people don't think it's as common as it is.
Yeah.
So people are either not aware of it, or the problem I had was because it happened to me and nobody else was talking about it, I thought I was the only one that it happened to. So I couldn't say anything because I didn't want to be judged on that. Right. And again, once you hit your pubescent years, I was extremely confused about who I was. Mm-hmm. And then again, we could fast track a little bit. As you know, I got into drugs and alcohol. Mm-hmm. I got into drugs at a very, very young age. Well, probably not as young as some. Mid-teens, I got into drugs. I didn't actually get into alcohol until later, but I had a drug habit, and it's not like I was thinking in my head like, okay, I was abused, so I need to take drugs. Okay.
No.
But when I started taking drugs, and then when I started drinking, those feelings, that weight that I had on me, kind of lifted, because I wasn't in my right frame of mind. Mm-hmm. So it was an escape from me, and that just snowballed. And as you know, my mom ended up getting sick, and I lost my grandparents. We lost a mutual friend.
Yeah.
And
okay. It is a loss for sexual assault survivors is different for other people, because we've lost so much already. And anytime we feel that again, anytime we have something that we love so much, or that's someone like, for example, our mutual friend, someone who accepted you for who you were, that didn't judge you, that stood up for you, that losing that is so
yeah I know. Whew. Right there with you. Yeah. But the closest people I had in my life all passed away in a 4-year span. I lost mom in 2007. I lost my grandmother in 2008. I lost my grandfather in 2009. And then, we lost Nicole in 2010. And then that went right into my first of 3 suicide attempts. Mm-hmm. I think my first one was the day of her funeral, or the day right after, which was horrific, because at the time I had a 3-year-old daughter. Jen, it's hard for me to even look back, because I'm not in that mindset anymore. Right. So I can't explain my actions. All I can tell you is that I know I did those actions. I started drinking. Backtrack a little bit. I started drinking right before mom passed away. So I had a drug habit for about 10, 11 years. And then I started mixing alcohol right before mom died. And that was in 2007. So yeah, from about 2007 to 2013, when I got clean, there's not too much I can talk about or remember.
I think one of the things that happens for survivors too, especially when you feel that relief that you get when you're using substances of any kind is when you haven't dealt with the trauma and neurologically and physically, your trauma response is engaged. So you're always in this very hyper vigilant state. You pay attention to everything. You over feel things. So somebody says something, you don't take it the way that it was meant. It means something completely different. Your body, without you even cognitively processing it, is interpreting what's going on around you. And then you're just reacting. You're not thinking. When you describe what you were talking about and during your first suicide attempt, and that you had Sky at home, and she's 3 years old, you're right. That wasn't a thought that you had that was a planned out thing. It was a reaction to the pain. And only responses that we as humans have to that type of detrimental danger or fear is to run, to fight, or to freeze. And that looks very different for every survivor. And in that moment, you were looking to escape. I mean, that was it.
Yeah. And I think, you know, there's only so much pain that we mentally believe we can handle. And when it gets past that and we don't know what to do with it, I mean, I can remember just standing in my house, walking around, like not being able to even process, you know, where I was, you know, who I am. It was, you're just lost all the time. And I wanted an escape. Again, I can't tell you what I was actually thinking. I just know I didn't want to feel what I was feeling anymore. You know, and like you said, death has always been a huge problem for me, because you get so close to people, and like I said, the 4 people that passed away in that 4-year span were probably, you know, 4 of the 5 or 6 people in my life that knew me, the real me. I didn't have to hide who I was.
No, you were safe with them. And I think that's something that people don't understand. For survivors, you have safe people. And sometimes, and this is the part that people begin to question, sometimes your safe people might be very unhealthy people. And we'll get to relationships and things later. But in this particular situation, they weren't. They were your safe people, and they truly were safe, and they understood you. And that's a horrific loss. So again, your trauma response is engaged again. You know?
And then now here I am after the fact. In my head, I'm alone, because now I'm back to, well, I have to pretend I'm this different person for the rest of the world. I can't be who I really am anymore, because everybody who knew me is gone. So that's when the alcohol really started taking its toll on me. Again, from 2010 to 2013 was horrific. 3 suicide attempts, countless arrests. I mean, worst case scenario, multiple overdoses. And then January 19, 2013, that was it. I met a girl. I fell in love. I wanted to have a relationship with her. And I remember clear as day, we were sitting in 7-Eleven's parking lot. And I was like trying to be all romantic as I was like drooling. And she's like, we can't have a relationship unless you get help. And for some reason that just, it clicked, something clicked. And that's when I decided that my daughter didn't deserve to have a father like this. I didn't want to live like this. This was not the person that my mother raised. And I just wanted to change my life or die. Like that at that point, those are my only 2 choices. I was either going to change or I was going to die.
Yeah.
So
I'm glad you made the choice to live.
so am I.
I am. And I'm glad that you've been willing to share this with me throughout the years, because I know what it's like to not be able to trust people and to have people that you can be honest with. It's funny because when I think of Joe, I've never thought of you as a substance abuser. It's just never even been a thought to me. I think of that genuine boy that I've always known and loved. And so knowing that you went through this, it hurts me as a support to you, because I would have never wanted you to have suffered through that feeling alone. So I'm just so glad that you made that choice that day to live for everyone that's around you, because you have so much to contribute.
Well, thank you. Thank you. But I was very good at hiding it.
Yeah.
And I was very good at hiding it because I had years and years of practice being somebody that I wasn't. And unfortunately, I didn't know I could ask for help. I didn't know there was help out. I really didn't. Like,
Right.
I didn't know. I didn't know. People, my friends would talk to me about, oh, I just got out of detox. And I always thought that meant that they got arrested for a week. Like, I
Yeah.
thought that was like street code for like, oh, I just got out of jail. I had no idea that there were treatment centers or anything like that.
Mhm. And you
So,
definitely didn't know that there was any support for a sexual assault survivor,
oh, I had,
especially a man.
let me tell you, I got clean when I was 36 years old. Okay. I wasn't able to say that I was abused until I was 39.
Mhm.
And I remember after I got clean in 2013, I decided that what I wanted to do was I wanted to be a drug and alcohol counselor,
Mhm.
because I thought that that was my problem. You know, drinking and drugs were
Yeah.
my problem.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to help people with.
Well,
Because
that's what society labels you as. They label you as the symptom
yeah,
instead of the issue.
right, right. And trust me, we can talk about that all day. But
Yes.
I remember I was working at a great treatment center, one of the few great treatment centers that I worked at, and I just decided I'm going to share this with all these strangers,
Mhm.
because that's when I was going through the I don't care if people judge me anymore. Like, I was starting to get past that fear.
Mhm.
And I said it. And I remember I said it out loud and I cried in front of 30 clients. And
That was brave of you to do that. That was really brave, because you don't know how people will respond.
no, no. And well, okay, to be fair, that was the first time I said it publicly. The first time I told anybody, I told my cousin Tammy.
Mhm.
And thank God she was the person that I did come out to.
Mhm.
Because her response to me and how she handled it gave me the confidence to be like, okay, well, you know, I can share this. I shouldn't be ashamed of this. Because let me tell you, Jen, I have told people
Mhm.
and I have not gotten a good response. I've told people, and after I told them, they have disappeared from my life. You know, and then I really started thinking about, like, if it bothers them that much, you know, do you like what am I going through?
Well,
But
and sometimes it bothers them because it might have hit a little too close for home and they're not ready. But I do want us to talk about that for a moment. I want to
okay,
talk about the significance, and how meaningful it is coming out to the right person. Because I want our audience to understand that there's the thing about sexual assault is it doesn't make sense.
no,
When you state what's happened, it doesn't make sense. Sexual assault is a crime of opportunity. It happens privately, between two people, and people just can't wrap their minds around that that's what's happened. But it is so important for people to believe a survivor and say, I believe you, and it's okay, we'll figure this out. There's help for you here, or, I don't know what to say, but at least I support you. You mentioned about, Tammy's response. You
mhm.
mentioned about other people's response. Can you talk to the audience a little bit about that difference? What it
Well,
meant to you?
Tammy's response meant everything. And again, I'm very lucky because when you say that out loud, you put that in writing, or you send somebody a letter, when you admit to that, you are, at least for me, I took down that wall
Mm-hmm.
and I said, here I am. So when you give somebody that vulnerable state, when you show somebody, I'm trusting you with this, if she would have responded negatively, honestly, Jen, I don't know if I would have been able to say it again. I don't know what that would have done to me. And unfortunately, you don't know how the person is going to respond. I've told other family members and nothing. I've told friends, and I'm very open about it on social media. There are, people have disappeared. Yeah. But you know what? I'm okay with that now, and here's why. Because so many people have contacted me, or so many people after one of my groups have come up to me privately and said, thank you, that happened to me. And they never would have been able to take that first step if I wasn't open about it.
And that's true. That is so true. And that's why I wanted to have you join us today, because I want people to know that they're not alone, that it does happen. It doesn't look the way that it happens on TV, where it's a stranger, that jumps out of you in a dark alley, that it is people you know and trust that are supposed to keep you safe. And it's important to support a survivor. It is really, if you can't do anything else, believing them is important.
Yes. Yeah. And again, what you just touched on, the people that are supposed to keep you safe, the people who are supposed to mentor you and show you what it's like to be a man, and show you what, you're supposed to trust this person. And when that individual is the person who takes that away from you, and, I think anybody who's listening to this who has experienced, sexual trauma at all will understand that confusion at an early age, like, oh my God. And I'll be totally honest with you, like when we first found out we were having my daughter, I was terrified. I did not want to have children because of my past, not because I was a bad guy, or not because I had urges, or not. I just didn't want to be that guy and I didn't know. I didn't have any kids at the time. Luckily, I mean, my daughter is my best friend, and we have the most amazing relationship, and her mom is one of my best friends, and we've really gone full circle.
That's awesome.
But at some point, you have the choice, and I chose to give my daughter a life that I never had. So,
and I think the other piece that's really important is that you had a really beautiful support in your mom.
Yes.
And she, the audience doesn't know, but I was close to your mom because she was literally a part of our lives almost every day. She showed up for us. She showed up in the classroom. She showed up on our trips. She showed up for birthday parties. She drove everybody everywhere. Like, she was that mom. And for survivors who don't have that one safe person, like you were talking about your mom and your grandmom, it makes it so much harder. Like, as hard as your experience has been, having an incredible support makes a big difference.
Well, that's the thing, because even though I never shared it with her, because in my head,
right.
Even at that early age, I still wanted to protect my mother, and I didn't want her to have that burden. But when I was with my mom, I was safe. So even though I never said it, when I was with my mom, I got to escape from that world. I had that. So again, that was also very confusing for me, because it was like, I'm happy here, I'm miserable. Like, I was going every different direction you could possibly imagine in life.
Yeah. That's a good point that you bring up about the fact that, and I get upset with the way media portrays things, because they portray abusive relationships, whether it's domestic violence or sexual violence, as all or nothing. So you are either in a miserable situation day and night that has no joy, or everything's peaches and cream and there's no turbulence or violence.
Yes.
And that's not what it looks like
No.
on a day-to-day basis. You have the highs and the lows, you have the good and the bad. And as a survivor, that's so confusing.
You're right. But I mean, reality, like we have good days and bad days. We have good moments, we have bad moments. Now, I can tell you that, you know, my abuse happened nightly, just about, for a very, very long period of time. But then again, I'd wake up and, you know, I'd get ready for school in the morning, and mom would make me breakfast or drive me. And so it was like, and let me tell you, when that becomes your norm, that is just like, you don't know what to do, because that's what's imprinting you. And that's becoming your foundation of life. And when that foundation is crumbling as you're building it, you don't really know, you know, and it's not an excuse when I say this, like, not that you don't know right from wrong.
You
but
don't
just
though. You don't.
You don't.
That's something that when we do counseling with survivors, we teach them that. We teach them, like, you have not been taught what's right from wrong, because what wasn't supposed to happen happened. And then you were forced to keep this secret because you were told that if you revealed the secret, you wouldn't be safe. It would be worse for you if you revealed the secret. And one of the things we work to educate people on is to teach them that abuse exists in silence. So when you can break the silence, you can learn to become safe. You can start to create safety in your life. But when you don't know that it's wrong, how do you do that?
Right. And I mean, again, it ended when I was 12. I didn't say it out loud until I was 39. That's a long time to carry that. I mean, and those are your, I mean, look what happened. I went through puberty. I got my driver's license. You know, I started dating. You know, I had a child. These were all major events that happened while I was keeping this secret. And, you know, not that I didn't have a good life, because I did. But I just wonder, especially with the drugs and alcohol, I just wonder what would have happened if I would have known that I could have gotten help, or if I even just had, you know, the ability to share it with somebody, if my life would have taken the turn, you know, that it did. But I'm here now. So
I want to ask you a couple questions related to some of the things you said. Like, do you feel that being a man impacted your willingness to talk about what happened?
Yes, 100%. But to be fair, I also can't speak for women, so I don't know the difference. I can tell you that I tried to be that jock. I tried to be the tough guy. I would get into fights intentionally just so people could see how tough I was. I'm covered head to toe in tattoos right now. I took anabolic steroids for years because I wanted to be this big, dominant, you know, guy. And I did that so, honestly, I did that so men would be intimidated by me. Like that was my mindset. I wanted to be the biggest, the strongest, the toughest, because I never wanted anybody to see me for who I really was, because I was so ashamed and so afraid of the reaction that I created this whole persona that I wanted people to see, and I lost myself in the process.
Yeah. And you mentioned shame and fear, which are the most common symptoms associated with sexual violence. And it's just so interesting to hear the hyper masculinity of, I'm going to show you how tough I am, you know, because I don't want you to see my vulnerability.
And again, I was projecting the response that I would get. Like, I had good guy friends growing up. In my head, I couldn't go cry in front of them and tell them what was wrong.
Right.
But maybe I could have. But in my head, I convinced myself there's no way they'll see me differently.
Yeah.
So I created an assumption of what their reaction to that would be, and I ran with it,
Yeah.
and like we talked about the other night, like growing up, it was you, me, Deanna, Nicole, Donna. My best friends growing up
We're girls.
were females.
Yeah.
Because that's just where I felt safe.
Well, and it's funny because when you talk about at least Nicole, Deanna, and I, we had all gone through our own trauma, right? So like birds of a feather flock together.
But the funny thing is, we never talked about it.
Ever. But
Ever.
we accepted each other and we loved each other, and we just knew that we could be vulnerable together and it was okay. There was
Yes.
a side that we shared amongst ourselves that we didn't share with others, for sure.
Yes.
Because it's so funny to hear of the hyper masculine Joe.
Look, I you don't always have to be the same person 24/7. And like now, like as soon as we started talking about Mom and Nicole, I started crying. I don't look, if I'm sad, I cry. If I'm happy, I laugh. Like holding back my emotions and holding in my feelings, which I got really good at, it did no good for me, Jen. It caused a lot of internal damage.
It did.
And it's to the point now where I'm oversensitive. Like I'll give my daughter a present on Christmas and I'll start crying.
Yeah.
She'll be like, "Dad, stop crying." And like it's just it's okay. I don't care anymore.
No.
No.
I think I know the answer to this next question, but just to share with everyone else, was it easier to speak about the mental health issues or the substance abuse issues than the sexual violence?
Yes.
Is it now? Is it the same way now?
I'm in a different mindset now. The whole substance abuse, it's so socially acceptable today.
Yeah.
That I mean, I hate to say this, and I'm not knocking anyone who struggles, because I struggled with it for 20 years, but it's almost like I don't want to say cool, but it's almost like
it's accepted. Yeah.
It's accepted.
Yeah.
And look, I haven't been, again, we can talk about this, but I haven't been to a meeting in 5 years. Meetings became like a social gathering, like a hangout. Like it wasn't, and I've been clean going on 9 years. I haven't touched a dry good. I haven't popped a pill. I haven't shot anything. I haven't had a drink in almost 9 years. And it was a lot easier, because when you're in the rooms, or when I was in rehab and you start talking about what drugs you used or what you drank, everybody's like, yeah, you're like you have that, you're all there, for the
There's
same
a camaraderie.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, to sit there and say I was abused, you don't know. But I'm glad you brought this up, because when I was in rehab and I would talk about, my drug and alcohol problems, I found comfort that other people, even though we were in drug and alcohol rehab, I found comfort in people accepting me, because I didn't feel alone. I didn't feel that I had to hide my drug use. I didn't feel that I had to hide my drinking. So what I really want to do, if I have any purpose in this world other than being a father, I really want to try to bring that into the sexual trauma. Like, again, I can't speak for women, nor will I ever try, but for men, I think to hear somebody say, I've been through this, just like I found comfort when I was in drug and alcohol treatment, I think that if more men would stand up and say, hey, this happened, then there is comfort in the strength in numbers. One of the things that really helped me, and I think I mentioned it to you, I had my counselor. I went to my counselor, and she actually passed away, and that sucks.
Yes,
but
it does.
She really helped me, because I couldn't get past the fact that I was abused. Because again, I'm this big tough guy who can handle himself, And then she put it to me so simply, where she said, well, what would happen? And again, this was years ago. She said, well, what would happen if your daughter was attacked by a grown-up? Would your daughter be able to defend herself? And I was like, no. And she's like, you have to stop looking at it through the eyes of a 39, 40-year-old man,
Yeah.
thinking this happened to me, because it didn't.
Yeah.
You can't put yourself in the mindset of, oh my God, I'm 4, 5, 6 years old. You know, you're not the same person.
Yeah.
You know, so that really helped put it into perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's not the survivor's fault. For whatever reason, this other person chose you at a vulnerable time on purpose so that they could have that power and control over you. When you were talking, I was kind of making some connections here. And I don't know if you kind of have realized this, but you said you hadn't been in a meeting in 5 years.
No.
And it kind of coincides with your age of when you first spoke of your sexual assault out loud.
I never put that together. See, that's why you're the smart friend.
But as you were talking, I was like, wow, I wonder if he realizes that that's when his need and what he needed support wise shifted.
Well,
and the meetings were different at that point.
Well, that's honestly when, look, drugs and alcohol were a big problem for me.
Mhm.
Okay. But there was a root. And for me, the root was my sexual trauma. Now, again, I did not say I was abused, so I need to use drugs and alcohol. But I realized that drugs and alcohol were the symptom, the medicine, whatever,
The coping, yeah.
for the root issue. So once I started identifying that, because I'll be honest, and again, I'm not trying to offend anybody who goes to the rooms or AA or NA, but I will never refer to myself as an addict. Okay, I will never say that I'm in recovery. Okay, I was just a guy who used drugs and then I stopped. Okay, like, you know, I used to give lectures in treatment centers, and what I used to say is, when I was a baby, I used to wet my bed, but I don't go up to people and say, "Hi, Joe, I'm a bedwet." So at what point do I no longer want to be identified with who I was? So I don't want to go around every day and say I'm an addict, because to me that keeps me mentally sick. But I realized that talking about the sexual trauma and realizing why and when my life started to spiral out of control, things that I did, like, and it wasn't just drugs and alcohol, Jen. It was women, it was fighting, it was gambling, like it was any enjoyment, any acceleration of my heartbeat that I could get going to distance myself from the pain that I was feeling.
Yeah. So that kind of brings me to another question, because, both domestic violence centers and sexual assault programs, we do not judge people for their substance use. We look at it as it's a coping mechanism. It's an extremely common coping mechanism.
Yes.
We get asked questions all the time of, oh, if someone is under the influence, can they come to your shelter? Like, absolutely, they can come to our shelter. And as long as they're not threatening or endangering other people, they're fine, because we know it's a coping mechanism.
Yes.
That being said, I wonder what you think, having worked in substance abuse and experienced these two things simultaneously, on what let me see how I can phrase this. I guess basically of people going cold turkey, like they do in substance abuse, where, it's you're clean, or weaning down as you address the trauma issues. What are your thoughts on things like that?
You mean going cold turkey as far as just like drugs and alcohol?
Yeah, just, you're a survivor and you have to, separate yourself completely from the only coping mechanism you've had to try to process this trauma. is there a better way? Like, I
Well,
think sometimes that's really an intimidating concept for a survivor.
very intimidating. And I'll tell you the way I did it, I did it the wrong way because I essentially lied my way through treatment. And here's what I mean by that. Even when I was in treatment, I went to an inpatient facility and I was there for 44 days. I did my 5 days of detox and then I was there for 35 more days. I lived there.
Okay.
Never once did I ever tell anybody there that I had been sexually abused. In fact, while I was still there, I literally made people think that my main problem was alcohol because I was still ashamed of my drug use.
Yeah.
So I took the most socially acceptable problem, which is drinking, and I ran with that. I don't recommend that. I got very lucky that I got through it because what happened with me is luckily as soon as I got clean, I started to attend meetings and I did right away. I went to meetings and I engulfed myself in the life. And then I started working in treatment as soon as I was able to. And that's kind of when I realized that I did it the wrong way. But I was very distracted, meaning my purpose at that time was working in treatment and helping people get through. So, I had a purpose.
But
I think that
it still was about other people.
It was about other people.
Grooming from your past was right there. Is about other people.
Let me tell you, people pleasing and codependency, I am the poster boy for that. To this day, I have the hardest time saying no to people just because I don't want people to, be upset. And I do go out of my way. It's a little different today.
But I get what you're saying. It's been something that's been hard because you're always thinking of other people's thoughts and feelings and perceptions and
yes. And the first time I remember I was in rehab for about 2 weeks and we were in small group. And that was really, I cried when my mom passed away, but I bawled. I bawled for 2 hours in small group. So you're right, to start dealing and feeling with all these, these issues and problems, when I would think of the trauma or I would think of somebody dying, or I always had that crutch of drugs or alcohol. And now here I am sobering up and I'm dealing with all these emotions essentially for the first time without, anything in my system. And it was very difficult. Like, look, I've had great times in recovery and I've also had really, really crappy times in recovery. Like these past 8.5 years have not been wonderful just because I put down a drink and a drug. And it's mainly because, I remember things start to resurface. And the more I talk about this, believe it or not, I'll talk about this and things will pop into my head for the first time that I haven't thought of in, since they happened. And then you got to go through that whole process.
And that is one of the hardest things is, again, your brain is a well-functioning machine and it wants to protect us so that we can, continue going about our business. And then when you do talk about it and things do resurface, it is, just another, outrageous thing that you have to come to grips with, and you go through the stages of grief. But you brought something up about being honest. And we work in our organization to educate people on healthy and unhealthy relationship characteristics. And it is so important to be honest, whether that's being honest with yourself or honest in what you're doing, because it does help you shift away from these unhealthy patterns of behavior. And you said it very clearly, it's when you became honest with yourself that things really started to change for you.
Yes. Well, I was a professional liar and I got really, how long have we been friends? You never knew.
No.
I got really, really good at it. And, you lie for different reasons. I lied to protect myself. I lied to protect the people I cared about. But lying becomes second nature. And it's funny because when I first got clean, I would lie for no reason.
Yeah.
And I'd catch myself and be like, I don't know why I just lied about that.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, am I a model citizen? Am I a perfect person? Absolutely not. I'm probably the furthest thing, but I try really, really hard.
Hmm.
I really do, and it can be a daily struggle at times. It
Yeah.
really can.
No, absolutely. And it all starts from keeping those original secrets of the things that, perpetrators groom you to believe. And when you're a child, they tell you certain things. And when you're adult, they'll tell you other things. And it's anything to keep that secret. It's anything to keep them in control. And it does create confusion, learning to be straightforward and direct with people it's a struggle to learn how to do that.
Mhm.
To be honest and to put your own thoughts and feelings in the forefront of something is hard. And
Yes,
it,
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely. And I'll never look. I'll never. I'm always going to be behind the curve. All right. I'm 44 now. I'm never gonna be on the same level as people who didn't experience. I'm always gonna be playing catch up.
yeah,
But it's okay.
yeah,
And I think that's the most important thing that I've realized, because there's no secret
right.
in how to overcome this, or
No,
I don't have it beat. It still affects me. I'm just not going to go around, with my head in my hands crying about it anymore. It doesn't do me any good. I
no,
can't do anything. I can't change it. I would if I could. Does it still affect me to this day? Absolutely. Has it affected relationships I've had? Yes, horribly.
that was my next question.
Oh,
that,
let's.
that's
I'm
good
an, I'm an expert.
segue.
I'm an expert on this.
um yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about the effects of being coming from a background of abuse, and you're taught all these unhealthy relationship characteristics. And you talked a little bit about codependency and things like that. And jealousy plays into these relationships and things. Tell me a little bit about what your relationships look like so that we can kind of paint a picture for our viewers and help them understand how sexual assault plays into it.
Well, we'll start with the jealousy thing because you just mentioned that.
Mhm.
Very jealous, and the reason again I felt that I was so jealous was because I had such low self-esteem and such low self-respect.
Yeah.
And again, still searching for my own identity. I always thought that every other guy out there was better than me. Every other guy out there had his,
So
I don't
why
know if
would
I can,
somebody want me?
why would somebody want to be with me? So always jealous, always looking for the other person to do something wrong and instantly jump on it and magnify it, to the point, because what I wanted to do was I also would sabotage relationships. I had to end it on my terms, because it would hurt too much if they did it.
Yeah.
And the only way for me to do that was to get that person to absolutely hate me,
Yeah.
and that I a lot of I hurt a lot of people.
Mhm.
And it sucks because the pain I went through, because I never dealt with it, Jen, I just carried it from one relationship to another relationship to another relationship. And unfortunately, without causing all these people the pain that I did, I probably wouldn't be who I am today.
Mhm.
So it's very hard for me to accept that.
Mhm.
But I mean, it's
You have to. Yeah.
you have to.
You
You
have
just
to accept
right,
it.
right.
Well, and I think a lot of what you're talking about stems from the fact that you grew up not knowing how to love someone respectfully, even though you had a good role model. There's other factors of how we learn how to love,
For sure.
and
Sure.
it's confusing. I mean, I want people to understand that, survivors are at a disadvantage in trying to learn all of these things when they become adults and function in our society, and how much better it is if we can educate people to have healthy relationship characteristics early than, you know, having to learn that later on in life.
Exactly. And you know, look, I mean, we're all adults. Intimacy is it's a very difficult thing.
Yes.
And you know, I always try to find a way to explain it, but it's I'm just going to say it, like, sex is it's almost dirty to me, and it's like once I start to have feelings and once I start to fall in love, it's like the less comfortable I am. And you know, I know that's gonna suck for a few people to hear,
Yeah.
but it's true. The closer I get to you, the more I love you, but the less and it's not that I'm not
I get it.
physically attracted, but it's so hard to explain that to somebody, you know, who doesn't understand.
Yeah. It's something where when survivors are trying to re-engage in intimate relationships, they have to reestablish all the trust that they lost in intimacy before that. And you're right, it really does stink for the person that you're having the relationship with, because even if they know what's happened, they don't understand that feeling of shame, guilt, the fact that intimacy hasn't been fun for you, that you were robbed of those experiences, and you want those experiences, but you don't know what they're supposed to look like. Intimacy is a really big issue, and we have some resources that we share with people at the center, a couple books and things that really outline it. But it is hard. So how did your partners respond to that? What, like, did they understand?
Some yes, you know, some no. I mean, my two best friends right now that are in my life are both my daughter's mother and my ex. And I think because they both seen me at my absolute worst. So I trust them. Again, like when I was a kid and I was around you guys, I could be myself. I didn't have to hide who I was. As far as dating now, I don't. I'm very content with, and I'm not hiding. Like,
Right.
I like being a single dad.
Yeah.
And like I mentioned earlier, being codependent was a huge problem for me, especially going through my substance abuse issues, that I enjoy. Like, my daughter's at work right now. I'm home. I love the fact that I'm home alone. But when I was still actively using, like, I couldn't be in this house. I couldn't be around myself because I hated myself so much. I just needed attention, and it didn't matter who gave me the attention.
Right.
It didn't matter where it came from, whether it was positive or negative. I didn't have to live with myself. Now I'm to the point where I enjoy my alone time. When I go out to eat, you know, with somebody, I enjoy it. You know, I'm trying everything I can to just be quote unquote normal guy right now.
Yeah. You just brought up another really great point, which is, you know, not wanting to be alone, not being able to be alone because the hatred for yourself, right? Because there's got to be something wrong with me. It can't be that this other person that everybody thinks is great, you know, they didn't do anything wrong. It's got to be me. I'm the one that's the problem. And then you added something else to that, which was I did anything to get attention and did anything to feel connected to another person, right or wrong. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, that has a lot more to do with my drug and alcohol. Like, you know, I couldn't be alone. I couldn't be alone, you know, and there was a period of time where I wasn't allowed to see my daughter, you know.
I remember that.
I'm open about that. I lost my parenting rights. And that was the best thing that ever happened to me, because that was the realization, like you were just told that you're unfit to be a father. And that, I don't exactly remember the timeline, but that led up to me falling in love and me just searching for that normal life. When you're blocking everything out like I was, and you couldn't, I couldn't process my thoughts, I would go out, I would go to the bar, I would go into the city, I would go wherever I was going to go. Well, eventually, Jen, what happens is your friends and people who care about you, they either get sick of you and don't want to be around you anymore, or they simply can't watch you destroy yourself anymore.
Yeah.
So that's what I meant when I said I was seeking attention from anybody who would give it to me, because when the people that you care about or who care about you can't deal with you anymore, you seek that attention from anybody. And when you have no self-esteem, like I had no self-esteem, the people that I would attract myself to didn't care at all about me, at all. But those are the people that's essentially all I had left.
Well, and it makes sense because, like you said, you didn't want intimacy. That was, so it worked for you in that moment, and it was okay.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't okay, but for you in that moment, it was.
It wasn't okay. At the time, it made perfect sense, and at the time, I justified it. It's, look, I think a lot of us would hit the rewind and erase button on a lot of things. I just happen to have more than most people. But
no, I think you bring up a really good point of, we can't change anything about ourselves, but what we need to know is that doesn't define us. We can determine who we want to be at any time. We can make the choice to be healthy in our relationships. And that's what you're doing. I mean, aside from sobriety and everything, is you're making the choice to be healthy in your relationships.
Yes, on my terms this time, though. I'm not pushing anything.
That's right.
I'll be honest. I have very high hopes that my ex and I will get back together one day. She's probably the only person in the world that I can see myself with, or who would put up with me. I'm not pushing it.
Right.
We talked about it a few months ago. Honestly, it didn't go the way I wanted it to. Okay.
But you can accept that today, where before that would have been an issue.
Before that would have put me into a spiral that, absolutely. Absolutely. But we go get ice cream. We go for walks. Like we hang out, we talk every day. And you know what? I'm thankful for what we have, because the fact that she still talks to me after huge. What I put her through it's mind-boggling.
Well, I think that speaks to the fact that, there's a lot of you that she loved regardless. She always saw the worth in you, maybe that you didn't even see yourself. So
I think, and I'm not just speaking for myself, again, because I did work in the field of drug and alcohol, and once I started talking about my childhood, a lot of men came forward, and I realized that I have a lot of similarities with these guys. One of the biggest things I still fight with is self-confidence. Like, I still have very, very little self-confidence, which explains, again, with all the tattoos and I wanted that fictitious attention because I didn't think anybody would essentially give a crap about the real me. So that's something that still affects me to this day. So,
So what do you think is something that that you do to kind of work on that?
I read. I mean, I don't want to be that guy and say I meditate, but I do have.
It's important. That's a healthy thing.
I do. I sit and, I try to align my thoughts instead of having them race all around my head. Like, I try to prioritize. It may sound silly to some, but every day, at some point of the day, I try to do it when I first wake up. I just try to think about some things that I'm very grateful for and that I'm very lucky to still have in my life. I go for walks. I try to look at the world differently. I'm very open-minded today. I'm not right. I'm not that important. Like I look at the world that I felt that the way I was living my life, I put a lot of unneeded stress on me.
Yeah,
And now I try to really be open-minded, have different opinions. Instead of arguing with somebody because they disagree with me, now I try to learn from them and see why they see things from their point of view.
yeah,
There's too much fighting going on in the world. Too many people are arguing, and the thing that amazes me is we only argue because we're only defending our perspective.
right.
Like, we're only seeing the world from our point of view. So to have all these, Republicans and Democrats and, different religions and everybody arguing with each other, you gotta take into account like your environment, how you were raised, things that happened in
Yeah,
your life. And there's more to be learned out there to listen to somebody else than to sit there and argue with somebody.
totally.
You know,
Absolutely.
my
Absolutely.
counselor actually told me, she said, if you see the world as you did 10 years ago, that you just missed a decade of your life. And that made a lot of
So
sense
true.
to me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think
You know,
that's critical, and it speaks to that fact that you're not defined by that, by your
I,
experience at that time.
I have redefined myself, and I will continue to, sometimes daily if I have to.
No, that's great. I want to ask you another question
Sure.
before we finish, because you were so involved with sports. I mean, just so that our audience knows, I mean, that was Joe's entire life. He was an incredible baseball player. Even from the time you were young, I mean, like, 10, 11 years old, he displayed this incredible talent, and that grew into the potential for a career in professional baseball and so forth. What was,
I,
go ahead.
I know I was going to say, it's a shame because I think that I was very gifted athletically,
Very, yeah.
but mentally I wasn't able to handle, I think I kind of topped out in high school where I had the athletic ability to go farther,
Mm-hmm.
but mentally I was so far behind and my work ethic was not the same as these other guys. And I thought my talent was enough to
Mm-hmm.
carry me instead of putting the work in. Again, I have a lot of regrets,
Well, it's because of everything else that was going on. You were distracted by these other things. You didn't have a real perception. And that, my question was going to be like, what role did your coaches play? Because there's a male role model. And I'm just wondering how you responded to them, and if they were positive or if they too, because I wonder sometimes, if coaches abuse their authority over their players and so forth. So I'm just curious to know from your experience, having been vulnerable as a young person and then growing up with this talent, what did that look like?
Well, I can tell you, I've never had a coach abuse me sexually. Never. I got very fortunate because talking with people, that apparently is
It's very
very,
common.
very common.
Very common.
I'm very lucky,
Yeah.
and not only am I lucky that I'm lucky because that didn't happen, but I also had that going on in another part of my life.
Right.
So if that would have happened again with somebody else, like I don't know what more damage that would have done to me. So I got very lucky. I always wanted to, please my coaches. I always wanted to, to do the best I could. I always had to be the all-star on the team. I always had it,
You always were.
I enjoyed people depending on me to succeed. Like,
Mhm.
we're going to win because Joe's on the team. Like, I loved that
Mhm.
because I wasn't getting that where
Right.
I needed it. So I needed it meant something to me.
Yeah.
And sports were very important to me. I loved playing baseball. Then I started getting hurt and having surgeries, and that within itself led into a little drug use,
Yeah. Yeah.
early on. But yeah, sports, I would say that sports, I don't want to say saved my life, but really helped me get through some very dark times in my life, because again, I had that distraction. I knew that when I was on the field or that I was in practice, I was safe.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel safe enough to confide.
Right.
And maybe I I had this one coach. Oh my God, his name was Mr. Parsons. He was my favorite baseball coach. He was like the head police chief in our town.
How old were you at that time? Were you like in
Uh,
8th grade?
oh, way younger than that.
Okay.
Maybe fourth, fifth,
Okay.
somewhere around that. But I often think it's funny that you mentioned that,
Mm-hmm.
because I often wonder if I would have told him what was happening,
What would have happened?
maybe he could have helped.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know, because I loved him. Like
Mm-hmm.
I loved him. He was like my vision of what a man's man should be.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
so cowboy boots, jeans, and long hair and tattoos, and I was like, I want to be like him.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I think that I was afraid. I didn't want him to look at me differently by telling him,
Yeah.
because at that time it wasn't like I mentioned earlier. I didn't want to tell my friends what was going on because of like our social network. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to tell anybody. I didn't want to tell my mom. I didn't want to tell other adults. I didn't want to tell my friends. Like, I just didn't want to tell anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if my drug and alcohol abuse would have taken off like it did had I got help earlier, or had I not been so afraid or ashamed or fearful of people's reactions.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if my life would have turned out the same, you
Well,
know?
I can tell you statistically, having been the director of a sexual violence program and now my position now, that statistically it would be different. Because what early intervention for sexual assault survivors and domestic violence survivors shows is the sooner you start talking about it, the sooner you begin to have a more well-adjusted, healthy life. And that's why we're doing this today, is to help bring that awareness of, listen, if you don't want to tell anybody else, you don't have to. You can you can call our hotline, and we'll get you the support that you need, because it's not easy to tell the people in your life.
No,
And that's what centers like us are here for. Um,
that's awesome.
and that's really what I want people to know. And so what would be something that you would leave as a survivor? What's something you'd like to pass on to our audience? Like, if there's a survivor out there who maybe is watching this, who has not come forward yet, or who's scared to talk about it, who's questioning anything, questioning themselves.
It as simple as, you are not alone. There are other people out there who have experienced this. Um, like we talked about earlier, Jen, there is comfort in numbers. There's comfort in knowing that somebody else out there has gone through this. And I've seen it just in the short time, because again, I've been doing the drug and alcohol thing for so long, until I just got so fed up with that field that I
Mm-hmm.
can no longer be a part of it. So
Mm-hmm.
now I want to focus everything on this. And so just in the short time of, my talking about it on social media, talking about it in lectures, the people that have come up to me and said, oh my God, like, I can't believe I'm telling you this, but this happened to me, and you're the
Mm-hmm.
first person I told. And to hear that, and to know that me being honest about what happened with me and sharing that with people is giving them the same opportunity to come forward and get that weight off of their back,
Mm-hmm.
that I know all too well that I carried for,
Forever.
decades,
Mm-hmm.
forever. So just, you're not alone. You didn't do anything wrong. If you could have stopped it, you would have.
Mm-hmm.
It's not your fault. I mean, everything my therapist has told me, everything that you've told me, Unfortunately, it's more common than people realize. It's more common than people talk about. And, you know, there's no shame in it. There really isn't. Because again, if I could have stopped it, I would. This didn't
Right.
happen to the 40-year-old me. This
Right.
happened to the 4, 5, 6, up until I was 12-year-old me. And again, if we all had a rewind button and erase button,
Yeah.
we'd all change our life. So yeah, one thing I can end with is you are not alone, and that's really it.
No, you're absolutely right. And something I always share with survivors is that guilt and shame that we feel has been passed on to us by the perpetrator intentionally, because if we feel guilty, that means we're taking responsibility for what's happened and they don't have to, because now we're blaming ourselves. So we've given ourselves a narrative or a script
Mhm.
that we're the ones.
Well, especially when we're kids,
Especially.
when we're kids, our heads tell us that we have to put this puzzle together, yet there's so many pieces missing. We're just filling it in with things that we think make sense. And we really, like you just said, we create our own narrative. We
Yeah.
really do.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. Well, I hope that we can continue to do little segments. I'd like to continue to do a couple different ones. I have them on my my filing cabinet up here that we can do stuff. But I want to make sure that everybody out there today knows that you can call our hotline 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. The number is 904-284-0061. There's an advocate that's trained in providing safety planning for sexual violence and domestic violence, and just know that you're not alone. And I appreciate everybody listening to us today. Thank you so much. And please look for us in the future. We'll be doing several more sessions and different videos. Thank you, Joe. I love you.
Thank you. I love you too.
Don't hang up. I'm just going to turn off the recording.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone, again. Please look for us on Quigley House University this month. Thanks a lot. Let me just